Alright guys, welcome back to another video. So let's start by setting up a little scenario. You're working at your bandsaw, you notice that the blade is starting to move back and forth. Now this is a very important thing to notice on your bandsaw because it is not normal operation. Your bandsaw blade should never be moving back and forth very quickly or rapidly. So this can be a sign of one of three issues. The first off is the most serious, and that is that there's a crack in your blade. So as soon as you see your blade starting to walk back and forth, turn off your bandsaw immediately. Do not try to make any more cuts, anything like that. There is a chance that your bandsaw blade has cracked somewhere and you need to go through and check that. So all you need to do to check for a crack in your bandsaw blade is make a mark with like a Sharpie or something so you know where you started from, and just slowly go through that blade and just check for any cracks, anything like that. When your blade is set up in the bandsaw and under tension, it's very easy to see those cracks. And you're gonna check every inch of it, both visually with your eyeballs and physically with your fingers. So you're just gonna slide your hands along it. Make sure you don't slide your hands along the teeth. You could cut yourself. Just be careful, use common sense and all that, but you want to check that whole blade. Once you determine that your blade is not cracked, you're in the clear. You don't have any serious issues here. The other two problems are pretty simple to solve. If you do find a crack in your blade, what I do is I take my blade, I'll wrap some green masking tape around it and write the word cracked on it, so that if I have that blade sitting in my pile to go to the dump, I don't accidentally grab it for some reason and set it back up on my bandsaw. I know that that blade is cracked. So it's very important that you label it, because also that blade does create a decent amount of hazard. Even when it's coiled up and not in tension, there is still a chance that that crack could continue through and the whole blade could just turn into a crazy whip. So you want to treat those blades very carefully, and ideally if you have a box that you can put them in so that if they do explode, they are still contained. So you want to treat a cracked bandsaw blade with a lot of caution because they can be dangerous. So once you determine that your blade is not cracked, you can check for the other two issues. The first issue you want to check for is your blade dirty? And this is exactly what we're going to be covering in today's video, is how to clean up this dirtiness of your bandsaw wheels and your blades. But this is very easy to tell. On the 5 blades I have in front of me here, there is a ton of resin buildup on the inside face of the blade. And this is where it's most likely going to happen, because as the dust falls down your bandsaw, it's going to fall that blade down. It's going to get compressed between the wheel and the blade and get really tightly packed onto the blade. The outside you don't really have to worry about. It's only really right around the teeth where I do get a lot of resin buildup, but the actual body of the blade usually stays pretty clean. But the inside face of that blade is going to build up very quickly. And so the reason that resin buildup causes that back and forth movement in the blade is because with that resin buildup, it doesn't build up evenly on the blade. It's all different thicknesses, and so it makes it so that your blade is a different thickness basically around the whole length of it, which means that it's not going to track at the exact same spot every single time. It's going to have a tendency to track to wherever the blade is the thickness that you kind of set it up at. So that's how you end up with that back and forth movement in the blade. So you're only really going to get resin buildup in your blade in kind of 3 different scenarios. First off, if you deal with a lot of pine, you're cutting 2x4s, or you're even working with, nice quality pine from a lumber yard, you're gonna get resin buildup in your blade because there's a lot of resin in pine. The second thing, and for me what's caused the most issue, is cutting green wood. I have a whole bunch of small sections of apple wood, ash, maple, some aspen and that I wanted to break down, and just by doing that, I've managed to gum up all 5 of these blades. And so if you're cutting green wood, it doesn't matter what kind of wood you're working with, you're gonna get that resin buildup on the inside of the blade. The final one is some exotic woods. There are a lot of exotic woods that are much like pine where they have a whole lot of resin in them, and that's gonna build up on your blades too. So if you're cutting a lot of exotic woods, you're noticing that buildup on the inside of your blade, it's probably time to clean out your bandsaw. So going back to the back and forth movement of your blade, the third issue that this could be showing is an issue with the wheels of your bandsaw. They might not be on there tight enough, or there might be a problem with the bearing. They might not be spinning true. So the way that you can diagnose that is first by going through and cleaning your wheels, cleaning your bandsaw blade, making sure that everything is as clean as possible, because that will help eliminate any other potential issue. If you've cleaned the tires on your bandsaw and you're working with a nice clean blade and you still have that back and forth movement, the first thing you're gonna want to check is just the tightness of your wheels. So in the case of my Rikon bandsaw, they're just held on there with a hex bolt. So I just take the Allen wrenches that are kept on the backside of the bandsaw, I just make sure that both of those wheels are fully tightened down. I've only had this issue once since getting my bandsaw, and I've had that bandsaw for about 2 years now. And so it's just a matter of making sure that those bolts are tight. If you've checked that those bolts are tight and you're still having that issue, that's gonna be the time to call the manufacturer or whatever service department you can to see what they have to say about the issue. But anyway, those are the 3 things that you want to check when you start noticing that your bandsaw blade is walking back and forth. So moving on to the actual purpose of this video, let's talk about how you go about cleaning all your blades and your bandsaw, all that. So what you're going to need is a product like Simple Green Pro Heavy Duty cleaning stuff. It's the purple jug of Simple Green, and this is the stuff that works the absolute best from what I've tried. You also don't have to buy Simple Green. There's a whole bunch of other brands that make the exact same thing, but in this case, I bought this full jug of Simple Green for, it was 23 bucks, and this will make 54 liters of cleaning solution, so that should last me a very long time. What you want to watch out for is places like Lee Valley that sell a special resin remover or blade cleaner solution, and in the case of Lee Valley, it's a pretty small bottle, and it costs 50 15 bucks. So you're getting way less solution for a lot more money. It's overall just a pretty bad thing. And from Lee Valley, I would very much so guess that it is the exact same stuff. You're just overpaying for it. And so all this stuff is it's just a heavy duty cleaner. It's meant to remove resins, gunks, all that kind of stuff. That's just what it does. And so when you buy it in a big jug like this, you're buying it in a concentrated version. So you're gonna go through and dilute this down. In this case, I'm gonna be using a 1-to-3 ratio. So for every 1 cup of this cleaner, I'm gonna put 3 cups of water. And that is the very concentrated option. So all over TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, you're gonna find people talking about doing the same thing with your table saw blade. And it's also really important, and at the same time that I'm doing my bandsaw blades, I'm also gonna be doing my table saw blade, some drill bits, some router bits, all that kind of stuff. Anything that has some resin built on it, I'm gonna clean them all right now. The only difference is that if you're just doing a single table saw blade, all you need to do is get like the lid of a 5-gallon bucket, cover it in the cleaning liquid, and then scrub it off. It's a much easier process. Whereas with our bandsaw blades, it's just not as easy. We need to actually soak the whole thickness of these. So unless you can find a round container that nicely fits your bandsaw blades in it, the simplest solution I found is you're just gonna get a bucket like this. You're gonna fill it about halfway or 2/3 of the way full, and then you can just soak your bandsaw blades in it, and then you can go through and scrub them and clean them as needed. Now this does require a decent amount of the cleaning solution, but you can also just put a lid back on this bucket and reuse that solution until it gets super gunky and gross and stops working. Then you just dump it out and remake a new bucket of solution. So the only thing you want to be careful of when you're using this cleaning solution is that you don't want to let the cleaning solution dry on whatever it is you're cleaning, and you don't want to let things soak for too long. So in the case of your just plain steel bandsaw blades, you're not really going to have an issue because they're just plain steel. There's nothing that can come off. But in the case of your painted table saw blades or your router bits that have paint on them, anything like that, if you soak these things for too long in this cleaner, it will start to eat through that paint and will make your blade a little bit more messy. So just be aware of that. Don't soak things for too long. I would say anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes is fine. Then you can do your scrubbing and your blade should be good to go. So the last and probably most important step of this is that you need to make sure you rinse off all of this cleaner. Because if you leave that cleaner on whatever material you're trying to clean, so in this case our bandsaw blades, it can start to eat through the material. Now it's pretty unlikely that this cleaner is aggressive enough to eat all the way through a steel bandsaw blade, but it definitely could weaken it and lead to a crack later on. So once you've soaked it, you've scrubbed off all the resin, you've got a nice clean blade, run it through some room temperature tap water and just make sure you clean off the blade again as much as you possibly can. With our blades all cleaned up and dried off, we want to now take a look at the actual tires of the bandsaw. And so on these wheels, there's this rubber coating that is meant to grip the blade, and the wheel itself has this little bit of an arch to it. So basically in the middle of the wheel, it kind of comes to a point, and that point is where you want to have basically the gullet of the teeth sitting so that it's providing a good amount of pressure on the blade when you're doing all your cutting on it. So you're mainly gonna have to worry about that buildup on kind of the front edge of the wheel here, and that's exactly where you can kind of see it building up on there. And so there's a lot of different recommendations online of what you can use to clean this up. I've seen suggestions online using things like naphtha, mineral spirits, lacquer thinner, paint thinner, all those kinds of very aggressive chemicals that they will take off that residue. But in all those videos, they very clearly mention that if you leave any of these chemicals on the rubber, it will completely destroy your tire and you will be out a lot of money. So again, on the tires, we're gonna be using this Simple Green just in a higher concentration to clean up our wheels here. Because Simple Green is a water-based cleaner, you need to be very careful to dry and clean everything off afterwards. Because these wheels are usually made from cast iron, you do have the cast iron table that you might drip onto. Overall, when you're done, you just wanna make very sure that you fully cleaned everything off and dried everything off as best as you possibly can, and just monitor the wheels and the table and any other metal surfaces on your bandsaw for rust, because that's something you do have to watch out for. So the way that we're going to do this is we're just going to dip the toothbrush into the Simple Green. We're going to go all the way around the wheel, just getting a good coating of the Simple Green green solution on all of this resin that's built up on this wheel. Then we'll come back through and we'll scrub things off a little bit more, and then we'll repeat that process until we've removed all of the resin. Then once all of the resin and this gunk buildup is gone, we'll come back in and just clean off the wheel as best as possible, using, shop towel, a little bit of water, all that kind of stuff, just to make sure that it's as dry and as clean as possible, so we don't risk rusting out our wheels here. The other thing you want to check while you're down here is your brush. So the brush on these Raycon machines is actually really nice because it's adjustable. There's a little slot in it, so all you have to do is loosen the bolt, move the brush a little bit closer. Then because I'm planning to saw a bunch of green wood in the next few moments here, I'm going to apply some paraffin wax to the body of the blade so that there's less chance of stuff sticking to it. So you're just going to run your bandsaw backwards, that way the teeth are going up, and you're just going to hold that piece of paraffin wax against the blade, and that'll just coat the whole blade with a nice thin coating of paraffin wax. And you want to do that on both sides so that there is some resistance on the blade to building up that resin. And in case you're thinking about it, never do that when the saw is running. There's a very good chance you'll cut your bloody finger off, even if you have a big piece of paraffin wax or something. Anytime you're dealing with the blade, anytime you're touching a blade, make sure the saw is off. That should be common sense, but I feel like I need to mention that because of some people. But anyway, the bandsaw is now all cleaned up. Our blades are looking nice and pretty, so I'm going to plug the saw back in. We're going to turn it on, and hopefully that little bit of walking back and forth that my blade was doing before should be completely eliminated. Alright, so there we go. Our bandsaw is back up and running to a nice true state. The blade is not walking back and forth. It's running nice in a straight line, and we shouldn't have to do this kind of maintenance to the saw for probably another year or so. The only reason I was having issues with a lot of my blades walking back and forth was because the resin was building up so thick on the blades that I've been using that I needed to take the time to actually go through and clean my stockpile of blades. So realistically, all I needed to do today was clean the blades, but it was a good opportunity to just go through and clean the whole machine while I was at it. So if you guys have any questions about this process, anything I might have missed out on, feel free to leave a comment down below. But as always, guys, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you in the next one.